Hi, Eva here. I'm back with part 2 of our fall landscape watercolor demo. Enjoy.
With the dark, I can paint over the yellow, but if I put the dark in first, can't really paint over the dark with the yellow, so that's why I'm doing it this way. So basically what I'm doing is I'm doing negative painting now, meaning that I'm painting the edges of some of that aspen foliage. And I'm gonna tiptoe into it. That's what I always like to say. I'm gonna tiptoe into it. So first, maybe I also like to have some of the evergreens showing up here, that they're taller than the aspen trees, and also to give you a couple of shapes that will tell you that they are evergreens. So I just put a little bit of water in, which I often do, and then I'm just going to start with a little bit of the French ultramarine blue, and I can barely see where I have that water, but it's going to be here, so it's going to run down like that. And I'm going to put a little bit of the indigo in, and now I just want to make sure that I get some nice edges before I go any further. I don't worry about the color right now, because that I can always adjust. But I want to make sure I get some nice edges so that I don't lose that nice uneven thing I got. And so it'll maybe come through down here, and it'll be kind of nice if it comes, so right now I'm just weaving it through. I'm trying to, find my way. And I like to use French ultramarine for that because it has that granulating effect, and that's going to be very useful also. And maybe there's even another little tree. Can you see how I can just kind of bring another little tree out and put a little dabs in a couple of places here, because they're going to be showing through where that foliage has little gaps in it. So now that I have my shapes, I'm going to go in and make it a little bit more green with some indigo, and I put a little bit of yellow in it. Now I don't want it too green because it's way back there, but now with the French ultramarine blue, that's kind of my insurance against it going too green on me. Maybe there's another little here. It's funny how they get little friends, they kind of pop up as you start doing this. You start seeing where it would make sense that they are. And there. And again, I'm just going to dab back in, and that will just change the color. So here, and since I already have yellow behind the blue, it's going to look green and maybe a little bit darker in here, which I like. And some more little holes. And uneven. That's the hardest thing, is to make sure that you don't get it like too perfect. All right, so can you see how I think that looks pretty good. Can you see then all of a sudden, it's like there's little sky holes, only you can't see sky, but you see those trees. So now I'm feeling a little bit more confident. And so here's another, I want to see, like I won't do it behind there because I think that is lovely. So I don't want to mess with that. I kind of like those edges there. I love that edge, but I'm not so crazy about this edge here. So I go in and find some of the edges I don't really think were all that successful. And I just go in, and there again I have a little bit of the French ultramarine blue on. And I'm just thinking about, so I'm just kind of dabbing and breaking into a couple of places, so then it'll be a little bit there. Maybe there could be some more here, because I'm not that crazy about this edge either. And then you can see it through here. And right now, and I'm painting on dry, but I have quite a lot of water and pigment on my brush. And I'm just kind of, all I'm interested in, I'm not telling you how many trees are back there, but I'm telling you that they're evergreens by the silhouettes of them. That's the important part. Just like I'm trying, with those silhouettes, I'm trying to tell you that it's, aspens or deciduous trees, because they have a different silhouette than evergreens do. And so I think it'll be nice to have a little bit of that going on here and maybe down here. And first I just get the shapes in, and I just try to evaluate them to see if they look believable, and if I have something going on, I say, ooh, that looks odd. I go in and stab at it a little bit more and try to fix it. So maybe that one can go up here. So a nice dark area. And then again in here, I want to make sure I get some nice, there's going to be some little, especially up at the tops here, you know, where the foliage is not going to be that full. So I definitely want to make sure that I get some little evergreens showing through. And I'm just going to go in one more here. It's another shape I don't really like. I'll put that up a little bit higher. And now I'm just going to go in and don't even rinse out my brush. I'm going to dip in the indigo and in the yellow, my transparent yellow, just to green it up a little. And now I don't even need to do much. I just kind of dip my tip in that has a lot of pigment and water on it, and it runs off and it changes that blue into green. Because I already took care of the shape pretty much, and you know, I can fine tune it if I see something I think, oh, that looks weird. Then I fix it in this stage. And maybe a little bit out there. And you never want to paint these kinds of trees individuals. That's not how we see them when they're kind of far away. And you know, they're behind each other and they're not all the same. You also want to make sure, you see how I take care that I don't have them all the same heights and stuff like that. And also by dabbing in this way, I do get a little bit of a variation in the color. So I could have just mixed myself a green and then gone to town with it. But then it's all so similar. And that's not really, if you look at the out again, I mean, how many green colors, even when they're a little backlit, they're still not like a solid color most of the time. And so just go in here. And then I'm gonna, so I have that area. See, I like the way that dried. Didn't that dry lovely? Then it's a little darker down here like that. Could just dab in a couple of places there. Maybe I need a little bit more like here. And I feel I need one other spot. So, because I don't want to have it just out there and out there, even though I did try to vary it. This could look a little prettier than that. Some little side branches. This is probably going to get covered up by the mat anyway, so I don't know why I fiddle around with it, but I do. And make sure that all this is kind of uneven, not all the same. There. And then there will be more of this see-through. Well, I wanted one other spot. Where do I want it? Needed to do that. And then just gonna some more like that. A little bit more over here will be showing through. I think that's kind of okay. Then we also have to break some of these edges down here, right? Because down here also some of this will show through. And there, and some here. And if you get something a little, maybe that was a little too dark right there, just dab it off. And you can even splatter or spray in a little bit too, just so they're not so hard edged everywhere. That's kind of nice. I like that. You know, it's all about variety. Vary the edges. See, that's good. Kind of soften out a little bit here. Where you don't want people to look too much, you don't want to have too many hard edges. Soften it out so there's not such a big difference. You know, because that's how we attract people, or how we make people look somewhere, is lots of contrast and hard edges and detail and, you know, stuff like that. And so up on the other hand, if there's somewhere we don't really want people to look too much, if we soften out the edges, it doesn't draw their attention quite the same. So that's why I like to do some of this. And especially here at the bottom, you know, the light doesn't shine down here nearly as much as it does up on the top. So it's kind of nice to break that out. A few more, and then and it's something, it's not like if you don't get it all done perfectly this time around, that you can't do it again. You know, you can go in and add a few more of these darks if you later on find out that it's looking still not quite the way you want it. I might probably do a little bit more. This is something I'll probably tinker with a little bit more, but I'm not going to do it here because we have a program. We're on a home stretch here, so you also have to have time to do your little things. So that's that for now. At least now I know, and I should show you. I will go in and do a little bit of breaking up this area a little bit more because it's all still very running all together, can't really tell much.
Won't it break up when you put your tree branch?
Yeah, the trees will break it up somehow, but let me show you what I mean. So I might take a little bit of burnt sienna and maybe I'll grade down just a bit with a little bit of cobalt blue. And then see, so I'm going to pick up this edge here. And I only do very little area at a time. Can you see how now I'm kind of telling you that one is in front of the other,
so it's not
and
one
that's
blob of color.
yeah. So, and you can see I don't go the whole way. Just a little tiny area is enough to tell us what's going on.
Is that burnt sienna?
That was burnt sienna with a tiny bit of cobalt in it, just to grade down a little bit. And can you see how already, and I don't need to do a whole lot of that before your eyes start making up areas that I haven't even painted. So that's how I do that. That's kind of like towards the end of it that I would do those kinds of things. And there especially I would have to think a little bit about where the light's coming from. And I think I had already kind of made up my mind that I'm going to put it this way. So then this edge of the tree will be a little lighter than the one, this edge, you know? So, but anyway, don't have to think too much about that. But that's just how I would break it up. And I just can't help myself. I think I want to do another one. Just so you can see it. So now I'm going to do this side. And just see how little it is, and then with a clean brush, I go in and I just kind of touch into it and lose the edge. And you can see you don't want to, if you go the whole way, it's too much. You're telling too much. So just a few here and there will do the trick. Oh, there's another one. I just, see, that's what happens. All of a sudden, I just can't help it. So here's another little one. And you can see how that, and then even break that up a little bit. There. See how little it takes? It's amazing. Anyway, so that's a lot of fun. I'm going to have to show you while you're up here, that way you can see it. So I am going to use the colors I already have in here, plus I need a little bit more cobalt, because I'm kind of out of cobalt. No, I'm not. It's right there. Okay, cool. So I'm going to take clean water, and I'm going to put it on the side because it's easiest for me to do that. I'm going to put some clean water down. And can you see how I dragged out? You didn't see me do that. I dragged out here a little bit so that I'm still going to paint some rocks or something there. Not too much. But just so it looks more like the edge of, and here I can just paint over because I masked it. Try not to paint into my rocks. And I always put my clean water down in a horizontal fashion when I am trying to depict water, flat water. Like this is flat water. Still, you know, it's probably, yeah, it's a lake. It's a little inlet or a little, you know, cove or something.
Emerald Bay.
Emerald Bay, somewhere, a little spot on Emerald Bay. So I put water down a little bit more up there. Can you see where it's? I still missed a little bit over here. There. All right, so I have cobalt blue on here. That was the sky color I have. So I'm gonna put a little bit of that.
Why'd you have a drip there? Just
Oops, thank you for keeping me safe. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of the blue in horizontal strokes. Because that says water. If it's flat like this, that says water, and that's what we want to say. This is some water back here, there. And I had masked out my rocks just so I didn't have to be careful there. Now the only thing I don't have the color of yet are those rocks. So I'm just gonna have to wing it, which I can. And that's usually what I do, so no, nothing new there. I'm gonna take a little bit of, maybe even a little bit of some yellow water, just a little bit like that. Don't want it too blue. All right, so that's basically now I've painted the water, plus minus. There. So now I need to paint the reflections. The way you paint reflections, believe it or not, is paint straight down. Reflections on water, they come straight towards you. If you ever drive around the lake, for instance, Lake Tahoe on an evening and the full moon is there, and you see that bridge that's reflected on the water, like that moon bridge, it keeps following you as you're driving around the lake. So reflections always comes towards you. So it's not like the same as like shadows and stuff that, you know, has with the light source. You are the center of the universe, so the reflections always come towards you. So that's something to keep in mind. And now I'm just going to try and pick up some of those colors that I have. So here, I'm dragging them down towards me. That's what I wanted to say with that whole spiel.
And those colors are?
So this was, I'm trying to, that was the burnt, the quinacridone gold, and I'm going to take a little bit of the burnt sienna also. I'm just trying to emulate the colors that are above that would reflect into the water, and it doesn't have to be precise. You know, it's not like it has to be exactly, but just so that it's believable that it's those reflections that are, so I just drag in here and there's a little bit of, so that was the yellow that we have there. And then above that, we have some of that dark green, right? So I don't want it too watery because then it's gonna run too much. I'm gonna take a little bit here. And the other thing you should know about reflections is that reflections are a little bit paler than what they look. Maybe even get a little bit of French ultramarine blue. They look a little bit paler than, yeah, bless you, than they look. Whatever's casting the reflections, that's what I'm trying to say. Whatever's casting the reflections, your reflections will be a little bit lighter than they are. So I don't want quite that dark, but I do want to say that there's some of that here. That's a little too wimpy. So, since I already have. So, like that, and then we have the rocks coming there, and then here, some more of that green, and here, I don't really, yeah, and more here, right? So there's in here, and there's a little bit there from those. So I'm just trying to see what I got up there. And I have to figure out what the rocks are. So a little bit more here. So I'm just trying to look at here. So here's quite a bit of the dark color. A little bit more here. And then just a little bit here. And now I'm going to get some more of the burnt sienna quinacridone gold. Because now we're coming to these parts, right? There's a little bit more of that. And here, just. And then the rocks, I know I'm gonna use French ultramarine blue. I have some here, lucky me. And some burnt sienna. Because, you know, I'm gonna have some rock color of some sort. And the rocks are gonna be darker at the bottom because they're wet. And so if I pull a little bit underneath there, that should be good enough for a little rock reflection. And a little bit here. And then there's gonna be a little bit right underneath those. And a little bit here. And then I'm gonna have to scrape out a few little rocks here, I think. So I'm just gonna put a little darkness underneath. That's that. Good enough. And don't worry too much about it. Just want to have a little bit. I could use a little brighter maybe here. Just a little bit. You didn't see this. Just want to have it a little bit brighter right there. And gonna rinse my brush. I can use this one. You could also use a flat brush. The main thing is that you squeeze all the water out of it and you have a nice sharp edge. And now I gotta get my straight head on again. I'm going to lift out, so it's still damp, I'm gonna lift out a couple of reflections to make you really believe that this is water. Lift up, and see now I have pigment on, so I gotta rinse it again. Same thing, make sure I have a nice sharp edge, and let's find another place where it would be nice to have a reflection. Can you see how by just doing a couple of those, all of a sudden I'm making you believe that this is water. And it's still water, so you know. And I should probably stop now. Let me see. Yeah, I think that's about good. Maybe I want another one right there. A little bit here. And now I really should stop. But can you see how just doing that makes you believe it's water? And it kind of relates enough to it for you to believe that those are the reflections. And I didn't want it too dark, because then everything gets too dark. And you know, often it is, you know, it's kind of like a mirror effect. Okay, so what I already did on one of them was I already put a little shadow on the one side of the trunk. Just, it makes it look a little bit rounder. Can you see the difference between that trunk and that trunk? Here I just lifted out, there was a little bit of green going over, so I spread it around and it doesn't matter. But can you see that? So I put it, and that is cobalt blue with a hint of burnt sienna. It makes kind of like bluish gray and lots of water, because I don't want it dark, because it's supposed to be aspen trunks. But it does look a lot nicer, even on small ones, if you put a little bit of a shadow side on, in my opinion. So the other thing that you will notice that's the problem with masking fluid. Like, can you see, does this look very natural to you? No, that looks not very good. It looks like it's stuck on the tree. So we need to, that's because it's a hard edge. And even though I didn't do it straight, but still it doesn't look right. You can never, you will never see exactly where a tree begins at the bottom, whether it comes out here, it comes out of the bushes are kind of covering up the bottom of it. But a hard edge like that is just never a good thing, because it stops your eye and it makes people look there, and then they're gonna wonder what it is. So I take just a flat brush. This has kind of short hair, so it's not exactly a scrubber brush. It won't damage the paper, but if I put a little bit of clean water on it and just have it damp, and I gently kind of scrub back and forth here, I can hopefully kind of make that edge go away, so that it's just a very gradual. See, much better. Doesn't that look better than that?
Oh, yeah.
So I go around and do that to my little trees where they come up. So that's, you know, these are little things that's like the finishing details, but they are important. So just a little bit like that, and then dab it and that way you don't look, it doesn't draw your attention. And so you also want to do that on some of the branches up here, just a little bit. These are little, you know, usually I end up spending, you know, depending on how big the painting is and how detailed and all that stuff. But I usually end up spending maybe, you know, between half an hour to 2 hours, depending on the painting. Or sometimes if it's a big painting with a lot of this kind of stuff going on, spending quite a fair amount of time loosening edges, I call it. You know, just those hard edges that serves no purpose, like here too. That looks kind of weird. There, much better. See, then it kind of goes into the foliage and doesn't really, same here. Should do this one too. There, loosen that edge. There. And so here I already put the shadow on, so, and this is dry now, so now I can show you how I do those little markings that are on aspen trees or also on birch trees, depends on where you live, what kind of trees you have. But for a painterly purpose, it doesn't really matter because I paint them the same way. So I have French ultramarine blue and a little bit of burnt sienna. A little bit more French ultramarine blue. There, so it get kind of like a real dark. And this, I don't know if it was, this might be one of those where you look away. Don't see that I stuck in with a dirty brush. So that's a good dark gray. And then I go on my, and here I'm using a small brush because these are small trunks. Use a bigger brush if it was a bigger. I have it loaded with lots of pigment, hardly any water, and I went extra on here. And sometimes it's a good idea, especially having done it before, practice a little bit. See, I'm after this kind of a texture, right? To say that those are the dark markings. So I don't paint like this, I paint like this. And I'm just barely skipping over those little bumps in the paper. And so for me, it's easiest, whatever way it's easiest for you. For me, it's easiest to get to it if I turn it on the side. And then I just go in and I put a little bit of that on. Can you see already? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Doesn't that just make it start looking like a aspen tree? Just to me. And just a little bit, so make sure you don't do it regular. Don't do it like, It's, again, and very often they'll have these markings right underneath where there's a branch coming out. And so just a few more up here. And I'll just drag in a few here where there's some little branches. So there we have it. That's all it takes for it to look like an aspen tree. Isn't that amazing? So little. And all of a sudden, you know, our little brains say, oh, aspen tree, or oh, birch tree. It's all it takes. So that's how I'll finish those off. So that was easy enough. Then I should also show you, and let me show you these, I can show you these two rocks. How about that? So now I really honestly have to make up my mind. I have already, can you see I put the sunny side of the tree this side? Yeah. Well, that means that my light source must be here, right? Mm-hmm. So I put a little arrow up there so I don't forget, because I get confused sometimes in my painting, and then the sun comes from everywhere. So I am going to put a little bit of water inside this rock. Let's see, you got a little paint on it, doesn't matter. And then I am going to use my rock color, which is burnt sienna and some French ultramarine blue. Just put them on my brush. And I start at the bottom because the rocks are the darkest at the bottom because, you know, they're coming out of the water. And trust me, wet rock is a lot darker than dry rock. So they would be dark at the bottom. And because I put the water in, you can see how it's flowing up. And then I can put a little bit more of the blue on my brush. That's going to make it even darker because this side is away from the light. So that means this side of the rock would be darker. And then this side would be lighter. Rinse that out. Put a little bit more of the blue in here. Need a little bit more. And so I'm just dabbing in more pigment. That's basically what I'm doing. And at the bottom here, it has to be straight because it's coming out of the water, and water's flat. Last I checked. Yes, it's flat. Always flat. Unless you're, in a boat and it's in big waves and stuff. So now I rinsed out my brush, and I took most of the water out, and I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna kind of pull that pigment here. This is kind of like the sunny side of the rock, right? And the top will always be a little lighter, so I'm just kind of making that happen.
Looks like a rock already.
Yeah, it doesn't take much really. And then here, got a little blue back there on this side. I can just dab a little bit more of this mixture in. So it's basically the same mixture I used for the rock and for those markings, just applied differently. And it's nice to use it, and I've already used these both these colors in my painting. The burnt sienna and the cobalt French ultramarine blue is in here, some in here, and it's nice to have some of the, and I want to put a little bit here. I just always like to have a little fun with my rocks. So there, that's pretty okay. And if I want a little more highlight, I can just, with a damp, thirsty brush, I can just kind of lift out a little bit more, and maybe there, just a little bit more. And I love using French ultramarine for it because it granulates, and so it already gives me that texture that kind of looks like a rock. I just want to get rid of this white sparkle here. And voila, there's my rock.
There you go.
So that's another way of painting rocks. Instead of scraping them out, sometimes I'll scrape out, sometimes I'll just paint them like that. Depends on where they are, how important they are. And there you have it.
This completes part 2 of my fall landscape in watercolor. Please continue to part 3 on my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching and happy painting.